question, so,
Yep.
this question says, what practical steps can non-Black Muslims take to contribute to add to the acceptance and integration of Black Muslims in the Muslim community? I think the first thing that needs to happen is there has to be discussion between Black American Muslims and non-Black American Muslims, a real discussion where everybody becomes honest about their sense of honesty and talk about the things that have come to hurt them and haunt them, because there can't be a worse feeling than to know that you've submitted, you've come to something so good, and then you see something so sad that hurts you and stains you with regards to how you feel about your own brothers and sisters. I think that the first step is to be able to say, we're all Muslims. We're all legitimately Muslims, and no one has a greater right over the other. It doesn't matter what language he speaks. It doesn't matter where they come from. That we are all credible in the sight of Allah as long as we're doing our job for Allah. And if we can get real with ourselves and eliminate those biases that have been planted in our heads by non-Islamic ideology, by ignorance, by old stories and fables and sickness and ignorance, if we can get past that, then maybe there's some real hope for us. Because I've seen things and you've seen things that have progressed in this country, you know it's not right. And those are things, those are messages given to us by Allah that we have some damage control to do. We have some damage control to do. Because we're not happy, we're not successful. That's not because of Allah, that's because of us, because of what we're doing or not doing.
Thank you so much. So this one is a question, and there's a couple of them we can just combine for the sake of time. This one says the Muslims are often in the African American communities selling alcohol. How can we encourage them? How can as Muslims encourage them to stop this? So a lot of times what happens is that we're just speaking past each other and not genuinely approaching people. And you'll be amazed if you organize a protest against that store, probably the reaction will be very defensive, and the person may shut down and not listen anymore. But if you go quietly, individually, directly to the store owner, and most likely the owner will not be in the store, it just has someone outsourced, someone running the shop, if you will. So if you get a meeting with the owner and start to explain to them, not at a Muslim haram level, but the sheer idea of what we're calling in social work these food oases. Like basically these are islands of in mostly inner cities where there's no fresh groceries of any kind available. A lot of the food it wouldn't even pass any test for nutrition, let alone the fact that money is being spent to buy it. So it's not just alcohol, it's the fact that they're perpetuating the sale of food and products that are not healthy for anybody at any level. Diabetes, for example, the overwhelming amount of foods that are sold that have the white processed sugar, even caffeinated beverages that are just not good for the kids, a lot of color in food, and then of course the alcohol. So I would begin with the owner. If you're in that community, if you're from that community, begin with the owner and start to have a conversation to say, how can we collectively help you make more money as you want to make, which is fine as a businessman, but how can you do it with a clean conscience? And here are some ideas. If you need more information about this, Inner City Muslim Action Network is Iman, is located in Chicago. They actually did this with the African American community and the most of the vendors or the owners of the businesses, and they're having some more success than I've seen in the rest of the country. So you should talk about this. Go ahead.
I think, first of all, the Black American person working in that store might say, you need to start with the Yemeni community. I mean, let's be real. if you go to some of the main cities, the main hubs, it's not Black Americans that are owning these stores. But you go to, in where I live, the majority of those Muslims that are selling alcohol are from Yemen. You go to California, who's selling alcohol in the gasoline stations? Yemeni. Now, the good thing about New Jersey, you're not allowed to sell alcohol in those mini marts, because if a person leaves there and they've been drinking, then you're liable too. But I heard that the Prophet ﷺ used to say this. I'm not sure if it's true or if it's sahih or not, but said something about him pointing one finger toward the other and 3 fingers toward himself. I think that whether you're Black, whether you're Yemeni, whether you're something else, the problem is you're selling alcohol, not the color of your skin. I think it's incorrect to assume that Black people naturally sell alcohol, because economically, the way Black people are economically segregated in this country, they can't afford to own a liquor store. Hopefully they wouldn't. Okay? And when I say they, I mean myself too. The problem is my father was white, my mother was Black, so I'm all over the place trying to figure out, should I say us, they, or what? But one thing's for sure, both of them taught me the tools that I needed to know to find my way toward Islam. And whatever apprehensions they had, it all dissolved away, because they saw that I was doing what was good, what was moral, what was right. Color had nothing to do with it. So when we have these campaigns, we need to direct them to the community as a whole. Because if you don't, you're going to create other issues. So I think, that's my answer.
Look, so another question deals with the idea of an imbalance. So it says, if we look around at the causes supported by the Muslim community, they're primarily causes of the immigrant community, such as Syria, Yemen, Palestine. How do we get mosques and communities to engage in local causes when the masjids are often run by one or more ethnic communities? So, again, I go back to the original premise which I had, which is that there has to be meaningful dialogue. I also think this is a generational problem, whereby more of the people who are born and raised here and second and third generation who only have known America, it is more and more common now for us to find, for example, a immigrant or son or daughter of immigrant completely invested in Black Lives Matters, or completely invested in a domestic indigenous issue, and actually trying to sway the attention. Let's say if we do percentages, it was always 90 to 10, almost like 90 to 10, whereby almost everything was international and barely anything was domestic. And now it's shifting in metropolitan areas. It's not fully there yet, but the only way I can survive day to day is to be optimistic that it will improve. But again, it also begins with the role you're playing. So if you're anywhere close to organizing, anywhere close to the voices of power, anyone within earshot who will listen to you, it's important for you to present the resources on how to organize campaigns or how to organize events or rallies or protests. Don't put it on someone and then let them basically try to do it on their own. It'll be impossible. They'll be defensive. They will shut down. But rather say, you know what, I have a great idea for this, that, and the other. Why don't we come together and organize this? And I have a set of resources. I have speakers I can suggest. I have people who have written about this. I have videos or clips or whatever we can use. So work at it together. And I think, inshallah, you'll see that the trend is shifting more positive towards domestic attention, but it will never go away. Why? Because even as we're sitting here, there are more people arriving every day at O'Hare, at LAX, at New York, in JFK from different immigrant countries. It's constantly going to happen. So that's not going to shift. Our goal is to say the bulk of it should be focused on America and here domestically, and of course keep a portion of our attention on the rest of the ummah, because that's where we're also part of that community.
I think sometimes too that you need to talk to the people on the boards or the shuras, and these things should be divided up like by percentages, like this amount for overseas charitable donations, this amount for the type of things you want to advocate or sponsor or support here in America. Like, for example, we should be concerned when someone doesn't have enough money to go to college. Okay, yeah, we care about people in other places, but we can handle both. Okay, we can give a certain amount to national and local campaigns and another part to international campaigns. But why can't we do both? I have to tell you, sometimes I go to fundraisers and I'm offended. I am offended that no one cares about the inner city youth. I'm offended that a child that has worked very hard and did what he was supposed to, what she was supposed to, and did good grades, got good grades, and can't afford to go to the university. Because despite a certain type of grant, it still requires more money. And the masjids won't do that. It's offensive to me, not just because of the color of my skin, because Islam has taught me something different. So I think we need to address these issues with those who are responsible in the communities and those who delegate money. Also to the relief organizations, we could speak to the organizers too and say, we would like for you to work nationally as well as internationally.
So just as we close out, just have a couple of minutes. One of the questions was how can, and it could be any ethnicity, but in this case it says South Asian masajids involve African American community more in the mosques, especially when there's no intentional or known hurdle. So, you know, I'm obviously a big fan of the masjid, but I'm also very aware of the fact that the location of the masjid matters. So if you have a masjid that is, let's say, more than 15 to 20 minutes to half an hour away from someone, it's not a common thing that they're going to make that a part of their center of their life. But however, the masjid doesn't have to be the center of that life. You could have programs, and it's being called the third space now. You could have programs that don't have to occur near where predominantly immigrant population lives. You could actually start having programming which shows a meaningful interaction involvement in different places where it's more accessible. People don't even take into account, for example, let me give you a basic thing. Democrats and Republicans, they did a study about when do Democrats win, when do Republicans win. You know, one of the things they found out? Republicans always win if on the day of the election, the weather is not good. If there's rain, snow, sleet, any of that, Republicans always win. Can you guess why? Can you guess why? Getting to the voting stations. Getting to the voting stations. If it involves getting on a bus, getting on a metro, doing anything where there's a longer walk and the weather is not good, there are people just saying, you know what, I would have loved to have voted, but I'm going to die trying to get there. I'm not going to be able to do it. Location matters. So I'm saying let's actually create spaces where you can have a programming taking place where it starts to get people to interact. There's in group work, there's basically a thing there. If you increase the number of activities that people do together, you increase ultimately the sentiment they have about one another, and ultimately you increase cohesiveness because they've actually had a meaningful interaction and over time gotten to know who are my brothers and sisters, who are these people who are on this side of the river, it's always a river or a railroad track, then I've never gotten to know them. I've never driven there. I grew up in Cleveland. Cleveland is by far, has been one of the most racist cities ever. You could actually drive in parts of Cleveland and you could be on a street where it's smooth sailing, get to a stop sign, cross that street, and there's potholes, no one cares for anything, no city services or minimal city services, minimal attention. What is that? What is that? That's basically straight up setting up racism, racist structures, and that redlining I talked about earlier. So if you can move events and have events where people can more easily come, believe me, people will start to have a closer interaction and relationship, and hopefully then you can say, well, okay, what? To be a member of our masjid, you don't have to live within this zip code. You can be anywhere within that area, and as long as you've interacted with us, worked with us, whatever, because that's usually a prerequisite to serve on the board of the masjid. And why challenge people and say, well, I'm sorry, you've never come to our events, you've never been a member, so you can't run for the board. Well, guess what? If you do an event where I live, I'll come to the event. If you do an event where I can afford to go, you set up some of these prices are too high, I can afford to come, I will come to the event. I'll become a member. But remember, this is not only a thing whereby just keep saying the other or that they're in need. No, a lot of what we're benefiting from, as I said to you, none of us could have come where we are as the immigrant community had it not been for the sacrifices of the African American community to give us the launch pad to start to really practice Islam in America. That's who sustained Islam through all of the racist, anti-Islamic bigotry of the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And because of their steadfastness, we were able to stand up. I almost feel, if you know the seerah of the Prophet, peace be upon him, the example of the African American community to the immigrant community is the example of the entrance of Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu to Islam. Before that, people were afraid to go to the Kaaba to pray, and they would get beaten. When Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu became Muslim, they literally stood up with a spine back and went into formation all the way down to the Kaaba and prayed. We just discovered how to dress, quote unquote, Islamically. People in Philly, go to Philly someday. Go to Philly someday and figure out what Philly is. Philly, they've always been dressing Islamically, always had beards, always had hijabs. They didn't wait for the tide to turn or the weather to be right before they started looking Muslim. They were always Muslim, and it's predominantly African American. So it's not impossible, it is very possible, and it's very hopeful, inshallah.
Also, after you found a way to communicate with other communities that are predominantly black or predominantly Hispanic, once they come to visit, make them feel welcome. Because you can be in a big hall full of people and you still feel that you're on the outside looking in. And how many times have we seen someone new to the masjid come and they're standing over there in the corner and nobody's walking up to say salam alaikum or hand them a plate so that they can get food or whatever. Old common sense, good manners. It's making everybody feel welcome. Just like I have to say, I believe if there was an ongoing campaign, maybe 5 months before the convention started, and to invite minority communities to come to the convention, give communities tickets, have contests for the youth to come so the youth can interact with each other. There are ways, creative ways that we need to think of to get everybody together in the same room and not everybody feel the distance that's between us, inshallah.
I know we have to break for Maghrib, but it's as simple as not serving spicy food that most people can't eat. That's as simple as that. Start with basic things that everybody who is welcome, because you can't welcome people if they're dying in front of you and sweating, their life out because you just serve food that is it's tasty to you, but it's literally a horror for the rest of the population. So just start with basic food that everybody can eat, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. Turning back over to the moderator.